Since the production of the firearm began as an obvious benefit on the battlefield and as a self-defense weapon, it's been widely used throughout the entire planet, more and more every century. It all began thousands of years ago in Asia with the hand cannon. The problem with the hand cannon was it required two soldiers to fire it, one to hold and aim while one lit the cannon. Around the 1440s along came the matchlock, which required one soldier to fire it. By the 16th century, it was commonly used. Matchlock was the very first firearm to use a trigger. It used a slow-burning match, which when you pulled the trigger, sent the match into the flash pan. Since then, people have always been looking for faster ways to use the firearm. The flintlock and the matchlock being pretty slow to reload. Around 1580 came a revolving 8-shot matchlock revolver. It was the very first revolver probably known. Being a matchlock, the trigger only sent the match down. You had to manually rotate the cylinder to get to the next round. And it never really caught on. And the slowed one shot evolved finally into double barrels, triple barrels, even quadruple barrels. This particular quadruple barrel was sold as a set, so you had 8 shots with both the handguns, including 2 smaller guns that were 1 shot, giving a total of 10 with 4 guns. This 4-barreled percussion pistol from 1785. In 1818, Alicia Collier came up with a 5-lock Flintlock revolver that still, like the matchlock, had a hand-rotating cylinder. And this set off a popular setting of the revolver, but it wasn't until 1836 that Samuel Colt patented the first repeating revolver that rotated using a cocked hammer instead of the hand rotation. Samuel Colt claims he got this idea from the capstan on sailing ships. By far better than manually rotating cylinder, this early revolver was still a muzzle loader, using percussion caps in the rear of the chamber being ignited by the fall of the hammer and then rotated to the next round with the pull of the hammer. By 1840 it was referred to Colt's revolving pocket pistols. 1849 it evolved into the Colt Pocket Police, still a single action mechanism. By 1851, along came the most popular of all, the Colt 1851 Navy. And it was in 1860 that they came up with the Colt Army. You can always tell the difference between the Colt Navy and the Army. The Navy has an octagonal barrel, whereas the Army has a round barrel. Between 1862 and 1863, these evolved into the pocket navies and the pocket armies. Over 19,000 pocket navies and 20,000 pocket armies were sold. But during the Civil War, not only was the Colt Army and Colt Navy extremely popular, European firearm manufacturers jumped on board with revolvers. 1854, Eugene Lafachaux came up with the model 1854. It was the first to use a self-contained metallic cartridge. And he referred to it as the 12-meter Lafachaux, or the 12-millimeter pinfire. There was also 7-millimeter versions, extremely popular during the Civil War. In 1857, Smith & Wesson entered the revolver market, coming up with the Model 1. It was in 1873 that the wildly famous Colt single-action Army came about. It was probably even to date one of the most famous revolvers of all. It's referred to as the Colt 45, otherwise known as the Peacemaker. It was in 1889 that Colt came up with what's referred to as probably the more modern firearm, or the modern revolver, otherwise known as the Model 1889. It was the first revolver with a swing-out cylinder. It was the first double-action revolver as well. It came in 41 long Colt, 38 long Colt, and 38 short Colt. The Colt Model 1889 was adopted by the U.S. military and was the military sidearm until the Colt 1911 came along. And it was sold as the Colt New Navy and the New Army. Smith & Wesson followed, of course, with the Model 1896, which shot a .32 Smith & Wesson long. But it was the Model 1899, also called the Model 10, and also referred to as the Smith & Wesson Military and Police, or M&P, and it fired the .38 Special. The Model 10 became the best-selling handgun of the 20th century, with over 6 million units sold, and the .38 Special became the most popular revolver round and still is to this very day. But it was in 1934 that finally came about of the Magnum era with the .357 Magnum, originally designed to fire through car doors, which was a problem police were having to this time, with the .38 Special. The very first handgun to fire this new .357 Magnum was a Smith & Wesson Model 27. 1956, production of the .44 Magnum began with the Model 29, which was made infamous by Dirty Harry. And to this day, the .38 Special, the .357 Magnum, and the .44 Magnum are the most popular revolver rounds on the planet. And even to this day, the revolver is still extremely popular, oftentimes becoming smaller and more concealable. The triggers are getting better and better every day, and for the most part, almost every firearm manufacturer is making a revolver, and rightfully so. It's the wise thing to do because it's still one of the most popular concealed carry firearms. There you go. There's our take on the history of the revolver. And like every weapon we talk about on the history of weapons, as evil shows its ugly head, good must always rise above it, and it's weapons like the revolver that allow us to do that. Thank you for watching this episode of The History of Weapons.